Once there was a trip of school that returns from their enjoying trip. It had been a long, thrilling day. The group of students had spent hours running from one ride to another, indulging in games and eating far too many snacks at the amusement park. As the evening drew near, they were packed onto the bus, eager to return home. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting the world into a deep twilight. The bus hummed softly as it cruised along the winding country road, moving through vast fields and forests on the way back to the small town where they all lived. The inside of the bus was alive with chatter and laughter, though the excitement was beginning to wear off. Some students dozed off, their heads resting against the cool glass of the windows, while others whispered quietly, reflecting on the day's fun. Outside, the scenery passed by in a blur, darkened trees and the occasional distant farmhouse. The night grew darker as the bus drove deeper into the countryside. The road narrowed, and the trees on either side became thicker, their branches stretching over the road like twisted arms. The sky, once painted with the hues of a setting sun, was now a blanket of stars, occasionally obscured by drifting clouds. The world felt quiet and still, apart from the steady hum of the bus engine. Suddenly, without any warning, the bus jolted violently. Several students awoke from their light slumber, startled by the abrupt motion. The engine gave a sputtering cough and then silence. The bus rolled to a stop, stranded in the middle of the desolate road. The teacher, seated near the front, stood up to calm the students. "It's all right," she reassured them. "I'm sure it's just a minor issue. The driver will check it out." But there was an undercurrent of worry in her voice that she couldn't hide. The driver, muttering to himself in frustration, grabbed his flashlight and stepped off the bus into the night. The door hissed shut behind him, leaving the students inside to sit in an eerie silence, illuminated only by the dim lights of the bus interior. Outside, the driver moved to the front of the vehicle, opening the hood to examine the engine. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, flickering slightly as he inspected the engine, trying to figure out why the bus had stalled so abruptly. Inside the bus, the atmosphere grew tense. The students exchanged nervous glances and whispers filled the air. "What's going on?" one of them asked. No one had an answer. Minutes passed. The driver hadn't returned, and the teacher began to grow uneasy. She peered out through the front windshield, but saw nothing beyond the beam of the driver's flashlight. It hovered near the front of the bus, but there was no sign of him. Deciding that she needed to check on him, the teacher turned to the students and spoke firmly. "Everyone, stay in your seats. I'll be right back." She stepped off the bus, leaving the students behind. The door hissed shut again. Outside, the night was colder than expected. The air was still, and the only sounds were the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. The teacher called out to the driver, but there was no response. She walked cautiously towards the front of the bus, her eyes scanning the darkness. The flashlight lay on the ground, abandoned, its beam pointing aimlessly into the trees. A chill ran down her spine. The driver was gone. She took a step closer, her breath catching in her throat, when suddenly there was a sound, a distant crack, like a branch snapping underfoot. She spun around, scanning the surrounding forest, but saw nothing. Heart pounding, she quickly retreated back to the bus. The door opened with a soft hiss, and she stepped inside, trying her best to appear calm. The students were watching her closely, their eyes wide with fear. The driver must have gone to look for help, she lied, though she didn't believe her own words. She could feel the tension in the air growing thicker by the moment. The forest outside seemed to press closer to the bus, the shadows between the trees growing deeper. Suddenly, the lights inside the bus flickered and went out, plunging them all into darkness. Gasps and cries of panic erupted from the students. The teacher quickly pulled out her phone, but there was no signal. The bus was surrounded by thick woods, isolated from the rest of the world. They sat in the dark for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was only a few minutes. Then came the sound, a slow, deliberate tapping on the windows. It started at the back of the bus, faint at first, and then moved along the side, growing louder as it reached the front. The students huddled together, frozen with fear. The teacher moved toward the front, her heart racing. She strained to see outside, but it was too dark. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she caught movement. a shadow passing just beyond the front windshield. She squinted, trying to make out what it was, but before she could react, there was a loud thud on the roof of the bus. The students screamed as something heavy landed on top of the bus. The teacher backed away, her mind racing. Whatever it was moving, scraping across the metal roof. The noise was unbearable, like nails on a chalkboard, but louder and more menacing. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sound stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. The teacher held her breath, listening for any sign of movement outside. But there was nothing. The forest had gone still again. After a few long moments, the lights inside the bus flickered back on. The students, still shaken, looked around nervously. The teacher knew they couldn't stay there any longer. Something was out there, watching them, waiting. Gathering her courage, the teacher spoke, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. "Everyone, stay together. We need to leave the bus and find help, slowly and quietly." With great caution, the group exited the bus and began walking down the dark road, away from the woods and the terror that lurked within. They huddled close, their eyes darting to the trees on either side, their footsteps quickening as the feeling of being watched never left them. In the distance, faintly at first, there was the sound of a car engine approaching. It was a lifeline, a sign that maybe they were not as alone as they had feared. Thanks for watching this video and subscribe to my channel for more videos.